Everybody remembers their first wave, whether it be in the ocean, their first break in business, or their first big win. I'm David McClymont, a former competitive surfer now turned C-suite executive leading the Palm Beach Symphony into its 48th season and your host on the Waves of Success podcast.
This show is brought to you by IYC Yachts, Chervaux, and Square Grouper. Produced by Indie House Films.
Hey everybody, welcome to Waves of Success. I'm David McClymont, your host, and we are thrilled to have a very special guest with us today. Roy Assad, who is the managing partner and founder of Human Capital Group, who's also someone that I've had the pleasure of knowing since 2014. He is an incredible entrepreneur and somebody that has many different businesses here in Palm Beach County that we'll learn more about today. So with that, Roy, welcome to Waves of Success.
Thank you. I love the name of the podcast.
Thank you.
It's great.
Well, as you know, it was a parlay between my former competitive surfing
That's
time
right.
and now turning into a grown-up business person.
That's right. No, I'm delighted to be here.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
So I'd love to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes talking a little bit about the many exciting things that you have going on. I've known you since 2014, and I've really come to respect you for many different reasons. One, being a great entrepreneur, but something that I think you do very, very well that I want to touch upon a little bit when we talk about entrepreneurialism is you giving back. I know so many people that you have helped. We're sitting here right now in the Ben Hotel, which is one of the corporate partners for Palm Beach Symphony. It's also the home of the Leadership Business
That's
Council,
right.
where you were former board chair. So talk a little bit about what you've been up to in the past couple of years and some of the exciting things that you have on the horizon.
Well, the world that I'm in primarily is about coaching executives and entrepreneurs. So I've been fortunate and I got rewarded in knowing and in experiencing about 1,700 clients that I've helped change their mindset or help them launch a business or even quit a business because sometimes they're just in the wrong place. The world of coaching has evolved. As you know, it became very, very popular about 10 years ago, and everybody became a coach, and some were qualified, some were not qualified. But the coaching that we do is measurable, so we help primarily entrepreneurs double or triple the business volume that they're doing. And that's by getting them out of their own way almost. During that time, though, while I'm coaching, I've built several businesses, and at the end of the talk, I'm going to share with you a surprise for the audience.
Perfect.
It would be fun.
Why is that important? So I'm CEO of the Palm Beach Symphony. I'm CEO, right? So most CEOs think I'm CEO. I have all the answers to all the questions. Why is it important? And we know that that's not true, and I know that's not true as a CEO. Why do you feel it's important? And what are some of the lessons learned along the way with some of these 1,700 clients that people in my position and business owners can learn from having an executive coach like you?
Well, in general, sometimes people say that we help support what we design. There's something that's very human. Human nature is what I design is what I support. Well, sometimes what you design has faults. Sometimes what you design has failures or something that has to be fixed or tweaked. So we consider ourselves, coaches consider ourselves the third opinion, not the second opinion. Second opinion is your mom, your sister, your priest, your friend, your brother. Everybody wants to give you an opinion. We are far removed from where you are and what you're up to. We come in an objective way and kind of take a look from the helicopter view. What's going on? What's going right? What's going wrong? What can we change? And how can we convince you, the entrepreneur, to let go of some of the things you have been dearly holding on to? Very hard to do, but it's very possible. So it is almost impossible to work with someone who's not coachable. So if they're not willing to give up some of the things they've been doing, then there is no coaching relationship.
So that brings me to 2 points. One is analysis paralysis.
Paralysis by analysis.
Right, that we all get into. So a lot of times we can be overly analytical as leaders and business owners. How are you coaching people to get out of the trenches of analysis paralysis is the first question. And the second question, what does your onboarding look like? Because I would imagine the onboarding is really important for there to be alignment with you working with clients to make sure they are coachable.
Yeah. The majority of entrepreneurs are not analytical. They're very emotional.
More of the creative side?
Yeah.
The Disney just launched
they've let go of the safety net. They've left the corporate world and they decided to launch their little boat in the wide sea. As you can imagine, that's how that feels. So we bring more accountability in the analysis we bring. So meaning we actually insist that there needs to be some accountability, meaning you're keeping track of everything that's going on. You're keeping track of the numbers. You're keeping track of the trajectory. Are we going in the right direction? Is your net worth increasing? You know, so all of these things that they may have neglected because they're so much in the weed themselves, you know, they just can't help see what's going on. But the discovery, which we call onboarding, we call it a discovery. And that first hour, 2 hours, is us learning about who they are, what they're up to. Do we actually believe they can pull off what they're trying to achieve? And are they really coachable? And so that time frame will help me or any other coach decide if this person is the right fit for us. And most of the time, I've had a few that I turned down or they've turned me down because they don't think we're the right fit. But generally speaking, we're always able to step in and help.
One of the things that I always talk about in business is that data drives decisions. I'm a big believer in that. And if I think about the 8 years that I've been with the Symphony, if we reflect back on that time, it's very fascinating how we made great decisions using data. I would imagine that's really important for you. Are you creating dashboards?
Totally.
And can you talk a little bit about how you use KPIs to help guide these entrepreneurs to have that instrumentation panel, if you will?
Right, and it's funny you bring that up because most entrepreneurs do not have that. They're flying by the seat of their pants. They hire because they feel like, oh, we need somebody. And then they regret some of the hires they've made. They do not even know where their next client is coming from. They're just, I can't imagine what I would call it. They're laboring. They're just laboring in the business they're in. And sometimes they're not getting the results that will keep them excited and motivated. So they lose hope. Mm-hmm. And the greatest leader, they say, is a dealer in hope. So that's one of the things we bring with us. If we believe that they have what it takes. Because sometimes you're dealing with someone who doesn't have what it takes. Mm-hmm. But if they have what it takes, and you bring hope to them, and you give them the path and the KPIs and the dashboard, and who's your next client, who's the next 10 prospects that you're going to bring to the table. Let's say you're an interior designer. Well, you know, interior design firms usually, let's say it's $1 million project, they don't just walk in and give you an account. They have to have heard about you. There has maybe a testimonial. They were referred, but you have a list of people that you're pursuing. You know, so we get them to really think strategically and think on the business, not in the business. You know, so they work on their business, not in. Well,
it's taking them out of the trenches, isn't it? And sometimes just wiping off the goggles,
removing
so they
them
have a
from
better
the office.
objective as to the vision of where they're going.
And accountability.
Right. Well, the accountability goes to the KPIs and having dashboards, because measure what matters.
That's right.
You know, another great book by John Doerr that I talk about all the time, one of my favorite authors who helped scale Intel. And in his book, he talks about that. If you can't measure it, it's not worth doing. That's the old Deming principle.
Right.
So that's really important. What are some of the lessons you've learned along the way that you could share with our audience about entrepreneurialism, building a business, the journey?
One lesson was the most expensive lesson I've ever learned was don't hold on to something just because you created it. You know, we have this attachment to the idea. So for example, if I bought a stock and I believed that that company is like the best thing since sliced bread, and the stock was $30, now it's 20, now it's 10, now it's 5, and I'm buying more because I believe in this, I'm taking myself way down with that stock because I fell in love with it. So cutting the cord on something is something that I think every entrepreneur needs to learn and not be completely invested in something so badly that you go down to the gutter with it. I did that once, and that is a French restaurant I opened on Clematis. As a matter of fact, Rocco's Tacos now is there. They bought that space. I actually closed it, and they were very kind to me, by the way. So I loved the concept. I loved the idea. I loved the chef. I loved the people that were working there. The menu was amazing. Everybody was writing about it. New York was praising it, but I just still wasn't making money. And I kept feeding it money until I ran out of money. And I wasn't willing to cut that cord. If I had cut the cord a year earlier, I would have probably saved 700 grand. So it's costly. So that's one of the major lessons I've learned.
I love to hear you talking about it in the way that you're talking about it. I have a term that's called failing forward. And I think that we've all had our lessons in life, both personally and professionally, as to lessons where we failed. But it's as long as you fail forward, and it's great that you've used it that way. The other thing that I think is really fascinating is to talk about EI. And a lot of different organizations are talking about it. The Gallup talks about it. Harvard has a bunch of different studies on it. I think we're starting to learn how important EI is, both personally in our relationships, but then definitely within business, because of what you just talked about. We get emotionally attached. So if you're coming in, you're working with a client, let's say it's me, how are you coaching and advising me, once you've done the analysis, the discovery, to realize that this really isn't a viable business? How are you coaching the people to sort of cut the cord, if you will?
Generally speaking, we get people who are hoping to launch a business, and we talk them out of it because they just don't get that this is not something that's going to work. So meaning we have the ability to kind of go through the numbers, the projections, and the competitive analysis and say, listen, if you're going to make 50,000, 75,000, be my guest. You can go ahead and do this. But if you really want to go where I think you want to go, this is not the business for you. Let's think of something else. So that's one thing we help. And I have done that a few times and extremely grateful. These people are extremely grateful because they would have been a sinking ship. When somebody has a business and they're coming to us because it is not growing or it is hit a ceiling, if that's what we call it, they've reached this level and they just can't take it to that next level. Most of the time, it is they who are responsible for that. And or maybe they have the wrong team, the wrong team members. So we take a look at that, and most of the time it is businesses that we can definitely scale. So in general, we don't talk them out of that, but we may talk them out of that new idea that he's veering off into and saying, well, I'm going to now open a retail store. Well, does it really make sense to open a retail store when you're not even doing this one right? So we talk them out of some of the things they're doing, or we talk them into something that they're not doing. I remember a client in Boca who had appointed their daughter as the buyer for their retail store. It's a women's clothing store. And this woman loved buying. She just loved buying. Flew first class all the time. She took a friend with her because she didn't want to go by herself. She cost the business a fortune and then bought the wrong things. So eventually they ended up with a warehouse full of things that the 3 stores they had, all local, couldn't sell. Hundreds of thousands. So what do we do? So I came up with the idea of saying, okay, well, why don't we do a few pop-ups? And let me tell you something, they got rid of all their inventory through the pop-ups because it was under a different genre. It wasn't the same name. It didn't impact the reputation of the retail stores. So there's always a solution that is out of the box that the business owner, because they're so much into the weeds that they can't even think and they can't even see it. So we help them see those things. Not all of them go along with the recommendations. Now I want to also reiterate, coaching and what I do is a little bit different. Coaching is, well, how do you feel? Can you think of something different? We're helping the client come up with the answers. I'm walking in with a brick in my hand and I'm going to hit them on the head with it. So I do coaching, but I also do consulting in a way. So, and I think you understand that because that's more beautiful, really, than the coaching part.
Well, 100%, because then you get buy-in, right? And to your point, I think a lot of times with entrepreneurs and business leaders, they're close. They just need a little redirection. And to your point about being in the weeds, we all get in the weeds. It's easy to get in the weeds. We need somebody that can objectively come and sort of grab us and redirect us, wipe the mud off the goggles and get us repositioned. So I think that's important. I love the fact that you brought up scalability. I've had some incredible mentors in my 20-plus year career of leading organizations here locally, and one of my favorite mentors said that to me from day one anytime we looked at a business. Is it scalable? Ask yourself that. David, is it scalable? And if you think it is, help me understand how you think it's scalable. And that's probably part of your discovery process, isn't it, when you start looking at whether this is scalable?
Yeah, and what are they willing to give up? I mean, if he doesn't want to do, or she doesn't want to do the changes she wants to make, you can't keep doing the same thing and expect any different results. There has to be a change. And that takes courage, effort, faith.
Well, and there's economies of scale too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
economies in scale in terms of how they manage their 168 hours within the week, which I like to call, that's our bank account. But then more importantly, their level of comfort, to your point about making decisions. Maybe they don't want to take on a partner or build an executive team because they want to hold on to the steering wheel real tight. But as the consultant coming in, if you just add a couple key positions, make an investment, that's going to be the game changer to take that business to the next level.
There's someone that I worked with for a few years who had a partner that was in the way. So we actually bought the partner out, and that's what liberated the company and liberated her. So there's so many different unique things going on. It could be a completely disastrous personal relationship that's impacting the business. So that had to be fixed. You'll be amazed.
Give me the top 3 things that you think are important for somebody to start a business. I come to you and I say, Roy, I got an amazing idea. I am going to start a bubblegum company. And you say, okay. And then we go through the feasibility,
can make money with that.
and then you realize that there's some viability to it.
Right.
What are sort of the top 3 things that we could share with our audience that are important in your experience dealing with entrepreneurs within the first 90 days that you have to look at to do?
I would say number 1, are they willing to go all in? Some people want to dip their toe in the water. That's not going to work. If they're not really fully committed to this idea, then they're going to give it a try. That's very different. So that's number 1. Number 2, do they have the bandwidth financially to actually see it through? And that usually is based on projections we create. So that means we have a
pro formas
for going forward for a year. When is the break-even analysis? When do we expect to break even? Now, I'm going to also share with you how stupid I am sometimes. But anyway, so that's 2. And thirdly, I would say, do they really have a drive, the stamina, the willingness to actually create a not such a great work-life balance? A lot of people say, entrepreneurs, sometimes they have to stay up. I mean, if you think about the people who started Microsoft, remember, they were in their garage for hours through the night. They believed in something, right? And they saw it through.
Well, as you mentioned that, I started to think about some of the best entrepreneurs of our time, and I thought of Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and every single one of them, probably in the first 5 to 10 years, were working 80 or 100 hours a week. Yeah. So it's definitely commitment. What else?
Your team, your partner, your life partner has to be supportive. Your family, if somebody, this all these little things. So the next thing is, I would say always hire someone to guide you. What do they say? Even the Lone Ranger didn't ride alone. He had Tonto. You don't want to be alone, because some big decisions will take you in the wrong directions if you make the wrong decisions. So having a coach or a business consultant or someone that you can trust, who's not taking advantage of what you're doing, but more really, really supporting and watching over you to make sure that you're taking every step that is appropriate to get you to that next level.
I found that in many different businesses, to your point, and a lot of the greatest leaders talk about that. There is a cross point in business where you have to make an investment, and that investment might be an attorney, right? Maybe you don't want to hire an attorney because you don't feel like you have the money, you're trying to cut corners. Same with accountants, right?
Yeah.
Now we can sort of do it in-house, but how important is that, to your point, about hiring experts and surrounding yourself with the experts?
Yeah.
And then with that said too, you and I love to read, and you and I love books. Good to Great is one of my favorite books from Jim Collins. He talks about getting the right people on the bus and then getting them seated in the right seats, to your point about building dynamic teams.
Right. So I was going to talk about the stupid things that sometimes I do. I get an idea, fall in love with it. I think it's scalable. I love the concept. I found the right person to run it. I didn't even do the financials. I just jumped right in. And it worked. But not everyone should do that. I'm just supposed to take lessons of my own, right? So I've done that. I've had my fair share of mistakes.
Yeah, but that's good though. You're being reflective.
Yeah,
another thing that I love to talk about is
mistakes.
that you use the windshield, Roy, in direct proportion to the rearview mirror. So if the windshield is 80% of the size of the rearview mirror, we have to reflect. We have to look in the back, and then we learn from those lessons, and then hopefully look through the windshield, and then go on to a new journey having reflected. So it's great that you're humble about those. And I think that's another great quality for entrepreneurs, is that they realize you're not going to hit every single mark with the companies you start.
Yeah,
it's actually probably the inverse.
Right.
I bet if you started 10 companies, 2 or 3 would be successful. 4.
If you can do 2 to 3 out of 10, you're doing great.
Right.
That's what that's the same with stocks. If you get 2 or 3 out of the park, if you get them out of the park, they'll make up for all the losses you've had.
Talk a little bit, if I may interject, talk a little bit about capital, all right? Because that brings up a very good point. You're an entrepreneur. I go start my bubblegum company. It develops traction. We're starting to grow. And I hit a crossroads. How do entrepreneurs go out and find capital? Obviously, sometimes people go to friends and family, which a lot of entrepreneurial stories you hear. But what are some of the things you suggest in terms of entrepreneurs tapping into capital?
In general, small business owners who are just launching are depending on their own bank account or family support, friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
That's in general. Some that I've known have quite a bit of credit line available already to them and what have you. But the best advice I can give a business owner who's just starting up or just launched, and they need to kind of build relationships with their bankers, with the attorneys, with the CPAs, with the community, because they're not going to just be by themselves, right? So the more they build these relationships, that particular banker may eventually say, you know what, I can make such a credit line available to you. But you got to have a relationship with these people. So that's one thing. The second thing, there are creative ways of raising capital, not necessarily the traditional way, which is the commercial banks. In the old days, it was all based on, like, if I knew you, I would give you 100,000. Remember those days? I don't know if you remember those days. You're not as old as I am. You walked into a commercial bank and they said, oh, you've been with us for so long, and okay. And they didn't make good decisions. They made bad loans, and that caused all kinds of problems. But today, they are like very, very careful with the money they give out as banks. So the other way to do it is, I'm going to give an example of a restaurant I know that offered 10 people equity in the restaurant and told them, this is now your restaurant. And now they brought all their friends to the restaurant, and that made the restaurant successful. So there's different ways of raising capital by giving equity.
So you talk about relationships. I'm a big believer in relationships. I know you are. One of the things that I really appreciate about you is that I feel you're a connector. But you're not only a connector just to connect dots, you really do connect people for the betterment of society. You're a fixture here in the community, involved in a lot of different organizations, Leadership Business Council. Why do you feel it's important personally and professionally to give back, connect people, help people? And I'll give you a case in point. Here we are seated in the Ben Hotel where Leadership Business Council holds their monthly breakfast. Every breakfast I come to, your table is full with usually a different group of people. And then I get to know the people that are at that table, and I realize those are people that you're trying to help. So why is it important personally and professionally?
Well, first of all, someone stepped up and helped me. And I remember that man years ago taught me I was an extremely introverted human being. And he would walk into an elevator in New York City and greet everyone. And he would, like, everybody's looking, I think he's weird. But he taught me that you really have to kind of be outgoing. That's number one. So I became a bit more I'm not as outgoing as a lot of people think I am. But at the same time, imagine if you've helped so many people, if you've made a difference. And I'm gonna recite a poem. I think I'll remember it. So it says, the slightest breeze that ever blew, some tender grass has wavered. The smallest life I ever knew, some other life has flavored. We do not live our lives alone, for other lives we touch are either hindered by our own or strengthened just as much. If all of us would think about what can I do, how can I make a difference in that human being, how can I lend a hand to someone, how can I give some of my time to an organization, the act of giving, and it's so rewarding, but it also comes back and pays you in volumes.
I could not agree more. I live by a principle: give far more than you expect to get, and you'll get far more than you could ever ask for.
That's right.
And I think when you realize the power in that, and it's simple, you touched upon it, making a difference. That can be as simple as just connecting somebody with a phone call. Or
buying someone breakfast and just listening to them.
Exactly.
Instead of throwing up on them.
So here you are, Roy Assad, founding partner, managing partner of Human Capital Group. You're involved in a bunch of different businesses. How do you create work-life balance?
I don't have any work-life balance.
And that doesn't surprise me. A lot of the people
I'm
that I have
single
on
guy.
Waves of Success talk about that. But here's what's interesting, though. I think what's interesting about that with a lot of the people I have on the show, Roy, they say the same thing. And part of it, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is because you love what you do.
That's true. That's true. I do have fun, believe me, don't get me wrong. I have an 8-year-old, so I've got to really, and I am having a blast with her, and I devote quite a bit of time to this chick who happens to be, I would call her my soul medicine. I mean, she's phenomenal. Now, but on the other hand, so that to me is downtime. When I'm with my Annabelle, the world doesn't even exist, right? I mean, that's really what children can do for you. They're phenomenal. And I hope we all should learn a lot from kids. And I know you have yours and you spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah.
But work-life balance is overrated. And it's somebody who came up with that idea.
But why? Let me interject and challenge on that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is meditation in the morning, working out, exercising, reading.
But everyone has a different concept of what work-life balance is.
Right, so what are
right?
the things that you do to unplug to balance, other than spending time with Annabelle?
For example, I love going to the movies with a bag of popcorn and with no one. I can go by myself. I do a lot of dinners. I don't know if you know. There's a book I read called Never Eat Alone. There's nothing like fellowship, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That to me is life. That's not work. I don't call it work. So I get that. I'm getting fed and I am feeding. Does that make sense? And you're breaking bread with somebody and building a stronger relationship. So work-life balance, it depends on the individual, how they view it. Does that mean that at 9 to 5, if you're thinking 9 to 5, you're not an entrepreneur. I'm sorry, but it's not going to work. Maybe later on in a stage in your life when you built your business and you have enough support and enough teams that actually will do, you don't even have to even go there. Layla, when I opened Layla, it took a lot of time in the beginning. After a year, I didn't even show up except for once in a while to say hello to someone. The place was humming, right? So if that was the only business I had, then I'm retired. So, but on the other hand, if I'm sitting, and believe me, coaching can be draining because you're sitting with someone who has challenges and you're trying to help and come up with unique ideas to help them. And then after 2 hours, if you're with that person for 2 hours, you're somewhat exhausted. So you need to take a break. You need to take time off. And meditating, I mean, if I'm driving to Miami, I'm meditating the entire time. I try to avoid phone calls in the car because at that time I'm processing, I'm cleaning up. And so there's all kinds of ways to really create peace and contentment in your life without having to be like rigid about how many hours am I working. Now, if you have a family, you've got to make sure you have enough time for that family, the kids, the spouse, the partner, or whatever it is that you're with. But if you're by yourself and you're having fun, I mean, how could you not keep going? You know, till you're exhausted and then you go to bed.
And living in the moment is important.
Yeah.
I know there are a million different...
I know most people don't want to hear this, but that's
Well,
the
no,
truth.
and I know there's a million different books that have been written on living in the moment and mantras and everything else, but I can personally tell you how important it is. To your point about driving down to Miami, we get into the hamster wheel and sometimes it's perpetual. And even just something as simple as driving to Miami and checking out, getting into a meditative state, relaxing, enjoying the drive.
And I'm 67. I'm not wealthy. I'm doing fine. I'm content to the ultimate degree. I don't have anything I want. You know what I mean? So that's a great state. It's that even though there could be chaos in my life, you know, believe me, I've had some interesting situations, and that comes up almost regularly. Just deal with it. You just deal with it, embrace it, deal with it, and go on.
And those also make us stronger, don't they?
They do.
Right?
They sure do.
So what is next in the world of Roy Assad and Human Capital Group?
Well, so most people do not know that I own an insurance agency. Most people do not know that I have now a bookkeeping company.
Well, your insurance agency, forgive me for interjection, that's how you got started, wasn't it?
And I still own it. Yeah.
Right.
And that's where I spend half of my life. Then we opened the social media company. And
what's the name of the social media company?
Social Visibility. And I found a managing partner who was amazing, and I partnered with her. And within a year, we became almost break even, so it's really doing well.
Congratulations.
Then we opened Alchemy downstairs. So there's a lot of, but now the newest one, which no one yet knows about, is a restaurant that's going to happen. I'm signing the paperwork on Friday at 1:30 p.m. at AKA Hotel, which is right on Olive. It is a hotel from Miami, and it is the hotel is right in the back of Canopy, if you know where Canopy is. So anyway,
that's one block away from the Palm Beach Symphony offices.
That's right. So long story short, we're signing the lease. We're opening a restaurant called Egg Bar, and it is taking the egg to the level that it needs to be respected. It's elevating the egg, if that's the right word. And it's going to be a place where power breakfast, power lunch happens, and you'll see a lot of great people there. And the more exciting part of it is we're going to raise the capital through an NFT offering, which no restaurant in Florida has yet done that. I know in New York they have. And that's going to be a very unique way of raising the capital.
Very fascinating. How can the audience find out more about you?
Me personally?
You personally, your consulting, life coaching, executive coaching.
They can look for social media under Roy Assad. Obviously, I'm on my own name. And then Human Capital Group, it's humancapitalpb.com. Getsocialvisibility.com. There's a lot of, but as long as you start by Googling the social media channels. I believe in social media, by the way. It's one of the cheapest way to get your name out there.
It's been a game changer for many different industries.
A lot of people don't know and they don't use it, and they should.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So I will share everything with our audience on all of our different channels. I'll share it on our website. And I want to thank you so much for being on Waves of Success.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, continued success to you.
Don't let the wave crash you. Ride the wave.
That's exactly right.
That's what you're going to do.
That's how I usually end the show, is by saying, until you catch your wave.
Yeah,
until you catch your wave.
It's mastery, really.
Yeah. Thanks again for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in to today's episode of Waves of Success, recorded right here in the Ben Hotel in downtown West Palm Beach with our very special guest, Roy Assad from the Human Capital Group. Please make sure until next time you continue to follow us and like us and subscribe to all the different channels. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, LinkedIn, social media for Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, make sure you catch your wave.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Waves of Success, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. We'd like to thank our sponsors, IYC Yachts, Chervaux, and Square Grouper, and the production team at Indie House Films.